special meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion.
Moved Kevin, second. Any discussion, additions, corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Comments from citizens? Anyone? Seeing and hearing none, we will move on to the finance report.
So I have nothing to report other than I will be just trying to gain more of an understanding of the funding, and I'll probably do some housekeeping to just move things to where they belong. But if I make any major changes, when I do that housekeeping, I will make sure to get that approved and inform you of that housekeeping.
Okay, anything in particular that we should take note of on either the balance sheet or the P&L?
Not at this time.
Are there any questions regarding the balance sheet or the profit and loss statement? If not, is there a motion to approve the finance report?
So moved.
Moved by Chuck, seconded by Rose. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None. Report of the executive director. Aaron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The October 24th property report was provided and is in front of you. We acquired 13 properties through condemnation since the last, during the month of October. That was part of the 18 as part of the Erie Land Bank work plan. So those are now in control of the Redevelopment Authority. We have evaluated those in the interim as we get them transferred over to the Land Bank. So it looks like 12 of them will be demolition by the Land Bank and one will be a developer agreement. No properties were sold. No activity on the commercial facade. That contract's kind of in limbo as we wait for the city to determine what they're going to do as far as allocating that money. And then in October, the Blighted Property Review Committee blighted 7 properties and did a blight rescission on 1 that makes the current blighted property list at 175 properties. So that is my property report with resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions regarding the property report?
I apologize.
Take a moment, that's fine. If there are no questions, is there a motion to approve the property report?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second that.
No. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, housing and rehab?
All right. So housing rehab report, we continue to move projects forward as fast as we can in the current climate with contractors and material shortages. So we're working through the LHRD grant along with the new contracts under the city's CDBG program and trying to match some funding there. We are moving ahead with a lot of the county projects at this point that were put on hold for some of the city projects at the end of over the summertime. So those are finally moving forward. Still working on the Keystone Facade grant. We're going through what we have, trying to identify some projects within that Serve Erie, the old Serve Erie area over there, for that facade grant we received from that. Our West Bayfront, still working with Anna and our West Bayfront as far as those projects go, and still doing the lead work out there at the Housing Authority, utilizing our lead services out there to help them with their lead grant. Currently, we have 4 lead abatement contractors on the list, so we're actively searching for more contractors as well. So that's the housing rehab report. No resolution needed.
Questions regarding the rehab report? Hearing none. General updates?
All right, just a couple little general updates as far as Rackby. Elmwood project is moving forward. Union Square, we're putting in an extension request to get another year of extension attention on that in hopes that we'll be able to get the EMT project finally moving forward. We have a meeting with all the interested individuals next week to try to get some updates in that as far as the construction documents and such on that project. As you can imagine, it's been a difficult year for them to get everything in place, so we're just remaining patient. Of course, though, the state consultant is not as patient as we are. So we're just going to meet next week and hopefully get some of that straightened out so we can move forward with the program into the next year. New employees are on board. We're getting training, going through some processes within the office, trying to get some efficiencies ironed out. It's causing a little bit of delay on some things, but I think in the long term it's going to be better as we move forward and onboard other programs that we have these processes in place. Vista application, we're going to put, the Redevelopment Authority is going to submit for another year for the AmeriCorps Vista program. Going to utilize the same basic principle we had last year in the healthy homes portion of it to bring somebody in to help build capacity within the authority on the healthy housing side of it, and try to collaborate with some of the healthcare organizations and other programs to utilize our services and increase the health within housing in the city of Erie. So we'll be putting that application in the end of November. The Erie Land Bank, the 2022 work plan was approved last month by the Erie County Land Bank, so we will put a proposed budget in front of them next Monday for their approval, which then will be incorporated into the proposed budget for you during the December meeting. So that will all be ready come December. So that is all I have as far as general updates. Any questions?
If there are none, unfinished business, the condemnation action at 2708 Downing Avenue.
All right, so as you're aware, last month, Mr. Crenshaw spoke in front of you. The Redevelopment Authority is part of the Erie Land Bank work plan had identified 2708 Downing Avenue as a property for condemnation. We didn't take that decision lightly. We don't take any eminent domain decision lightly. It's based on a long history of data and working with the gentleman from code enforcement to identify these properties. 2708 Downing had been on the radar of code enforcement for a period of time. Therefore, it was a candidate for the condemnation to rid the neighborhood and ultimately the neighbors and that of this blighted property. So he had asked that it be placed on the agenda for the board to consider dropping the condemnation action on the property. So I have placed it on the agenda for a vote from you today. So I did ask Code Enforcement Officer Yurkowitz and Demolition Coordinator Lavery to be here if you had any questions pertaining to the process that goes involved with that. And then Gene provided a memo with his recommendation on the condemnation of the property as well that I forwarded out to you this morning.
Anyone have questions?
I don't have questions, but I do have a comment. Because of the nature of the property and the ongoing issue that we've had, could we hear from the code enforcement officer just a brief comments as to maybe what was seen at the property, just
Absolutely.
to have it in the report?
Excellent idea.
Steve?
I'm Steve Yurkowitz, City of Erie Code Enforcement Officer for the area east of the Bayfront Highway. And I've been dealing with this property since 2015. I started in 2014 and started shortly after that. I've sent out numerous violation notices to Mr. Crenshaw to board the property up, to remove junk and debris. People, for some reason, like to pull into the driveway there and dump everything off. And the city's cleaned it up, and as of recently, Mr. Crenshaw has cleaned it up. I've sent out numerous grass violations on the property too. I've received many complaints about the property, probably about a dozen complaints a year on this property because of the condition of it.
And what is the condition of the physical structure in addition to the dumping issue?
Before I started with the City of Erie, there was a fire at the property. I was was inside. I did take some photographs of the property and interior when I started here. Studs are charred pretty bad. It's going to take quite extensive work to rehab this property. Prior to being a code enforcement officer, I was a contractor too, so I do have experience with this stuff.
Thank you. Any questions specifically?
No,
Mr.
they're
Erie?
not. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
So we have previously voted to take this property in a condemnation. I don't think we have to vote to reaffirm that, but does anyone want to make a motion to terminate the condemnation? Hearing no such motion, I think things proceed.
Thank you.
Housing plan.
All right, so just an update on the housing plan. If it is scheduled hopefully to be back on City Council's agenda for the 17th meeting. That is the plan going. At this point, of course, there's still some questions coming in from some of the councilmen about the plan. Hopefully, we'll get the answers to that. I had a conversation with Jackie Spry, the art program manager from the city, before this meeting. She had some questions from Councilman Keys, so hopefully we'll get her the answer.
Do you know the questions? What the questions
He
are?
just had some questions as far as the loan programs, and that he thought, and he had seen that a lot of them were still loan programs. And in talking with Jackie, since we're still waiting on that final guidance on the art money, it's still undetermined at this point whether or not loan programs are going to be eligible under that funding. So, and we had changed a lot of, I should say, the three main loan programs do have a forgivable loan option on them now, based upon, determining factors of individuals that would apply for those. So, I told her that, that, there is that forgivable loan option, which, explained the forgivable loan, that we would hold an affordability period, which we have not determined yet, since, we're still developing the programs, that, at such point they would become a grant, which I believe is Councilman Key's biggest thing, is he wants to see more grants, which there is a substantial amount of grant built into the plan itself.
I know we've done that in the past as far as the loan programs and the forgivable loan process. Do we know how many years that was before? When we used to do it? It might have been before you were there, Aaron.
Yeah, it was probably before my time. The only loans we do right now, our federal funds have affordability periods, so we do put mortgages on the property for a period of time,
Sure.
which are forgivable at that time. CDBG in particular, 5 years, it becomes a grant as long as they retain ownership. So,
Sure.
just to hold that period and make sure that the purpose is for owner occupancy.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a comment. I would love for us, just if we have some records, just to look into that, to see if we could match or come up with something that we can process everything.
Well, and I think, I think we have some options, if I remember correctly, under home guidelines and else. I mean, you could do a 10-year declining, so that each year 1/10 is kind of wiped off. I think sometimes you want to do a loan program to avoid flipping, and I think that's probably what our major concern. I'm all about improving properties and helping folks, but sometimes people take advantage of the situation. I think that's one of the safeguards that we want to be able to put in, and maybe that's something that other people need to be educated on. That's really the purpose of loan, as opposed to a grant, is to minimize the flipping, or somebody unfairly taking advantage of a government program.
Yeah.
That's good, Chuck.
Yeah.
Any other questions for that?
Are both councilmen's concerns the same?
The
There were
o-
two, right? Ed and Mike both had reservations to different things.
Yeah, I know the only thing I've heard specifically is from Councilman Keys as far as his reservations with
Okay.
the loan portion of it. As far as I haven't heard anything specifically from anyone else
Okay.
since the meetings.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
And
If we don't have more general questions, I see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 job descriptions to talk about.
yeah, so we had talked back what was it, September meeting about some job descriptions. So I put some together basically to start that process. They're certainly, you know, still very high level. We haven't narrowed down the details of them yet. You know, they're still work in progress. But I just got 5 job descriptions on there. Really thinking 4 would be probably the main ask at this point, you know, if the housing plan is approved, to move forward with, you know, the inspector. Of course, you know, with the influx of additional funding to rehabilitate properties, you know, the 3 inspectors along with our current workload, you know, would be sufficient to perform those activities. The property blight coordinator, you know, that's one that the authority needs to help alleviate a lot of stuff off of my workload. Currently, I handle pretty much the blight coordinator position along with the Erie Land Bank and, you know, all those activities and duties there. That is also built into the Erie Land Bank's work plan. We do have a substantial administrative cost into that work plan to the county to help offset some of the administrative time that the authority puts in toward the Erie Land Bank activity. So that position would be partially funded out of that Erie Land Bank work plan as well. The loan officer is one, you know, and Carrie and I have just started having conversations about the revolving loan program. Where we're scheduled to meet tomorrow with Chris Groner to talk more about it and finally get Carrie, you know, on board with, you know, since she's came on board with talking about the revolving loan and meeting with Chris. So we're going to dive into that tomorrow, and then hopefully he'll be able to give her some references to look into and that, so we can start to build that program. We certainly know, you know, pending council approval, that'll be the program that will take us the longest to get off the ground, you know, and getting that revolving loan up. And so then there's also the fiscal administrator is another one that would be kind of flip-flop, whether or not either one of those would be needed, which one we would choose, depending upon whatever Carrie would recommend on that side of the fiscal part of the revolving loan fund. And then the last one was the director of housing programs. As these programs come on board, it may be necessary to bring on somebody to be a coordinating person, you know, over top of all of those programs. At this point, you know, that was my old position prior to becoming the executive director. You know, not really sure at this point how having somebody handling the blight would alleviate the stuff off of my desk, and whether or not, you know, with 3 inspectors, the current rehabilitation manager may be able to pick up a lot of those duties. So that's another position that's kind of, you know, tentative, not really necessarily needed at the current time, but something that may be needed looking further down the road as things were to get up to speed. I was working on an organizational chart. Unfortunately, time did not permit me to finish that for you for this meeting. So hopefully at the December meeting, I'd have more of an organizational chart with some of these new positions for the housing plan, and then hopefully at that December meeting, we have a better decision as far as how that's moving forward.
I'm not sure how this works in an authority, so apologize if I'm asking out of turn, but have you thought about a revenue generator as a position? Somebody who helps you create the sustainability programs, writes your grants, figures out ways to get revenue into the authority for you long term, you know, ongoing.
No, yeah, you know, there was something, you know, certainly, you know, an aspect we do need is somebody who would be able to do grant writing. I mean, that would alleviate a lot, and especially with this money and be able looking at leveraging it. I do agree with you that it was something I thought about, but certainly not one that I put a job description for at this time. But certainly, I would agree with you.
Is there a possibility that one of these positions might, you know, you might be able to put some of the skill sets in one of these existing positions? You can always, you know, consider outsourcing as well. I mean, but somebody other than the CEO needs to kind of be able to oversee that. And maybe that's a
right. And I certainly think, you know, within the authority now, we do have the ability to do a little bit of shifting and might be able to have that already on board, that we can utilize staff members that are already there as a grant, you know, writer as part of a job description.
And Rose does bring up an excellent point in terms of, you know, long-term sustainability. And, you know,
grants, events, asking people for money, creating those types of programs. I wouldn't say just grants, that's one thing. But there's also creating a donor base of people who want to give you money to do certain things. Like, for instance, I love Little Italy, which we all know. If I had potential to give money, I might say, I'll give you $12,000 to take down this blighted property in Little Italy and create this something out of it. So that kind of, getting your name out there, getting your mission out there, which also, usually those positions also do kind of the marketing communications piece. So, more people are wanting to support you because you're making a difference in the world, basically.
Absolutely, great point.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since the authorities had any money to leverage.
Right.
So yes, we
And it's a
should
perfect opportunity.
take
really.
advantage of that
No,
opportunity.
I would agree. We'll start working on a draft for that one as well for you guys to review.
So as far as the ones we've received, these are informational, and you'd like us to get you any comments we might have on them?
Yes.
As part of your process?
Yes, that would be
And
great.
assuming in December we have the money, yay, then we can...
That would be, yeah. If all goes as planned and next Wednesday is successful, then in Wednesday we'll be having a different conversation about organizational and plan rollout.
So which would be the first hire?
Blight and inspector would certainly be the first two that would be hired and needed immediately.
Boots on the ground.
Yeah. I do have a question. On the blight coordinator, is there, and I'm speaking out of ignorance, is there any way we can look at perhaps bringing that responsibility into the director's role for the housing program? I don't know how heavy those responsibilities, I know you usually carry them. The only reason I'm asking is this revenue generator position that Rose just spoke of, I just think it's very important, and that's another one that we need to hit the ground running on. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, no, I mean, that certainly I could look at that and see. I mean, it would be a lot at the beginning, but I think long term it would certainly be I think that might be something that could work.
Yeah, and we could probably shift some funds at that particular point so that we can begin to build off of that. I think it would be a little bit easier.
Okay, yeah, I'll look at those.
More money you raise, the more positions you can build in the
Yeah.
future. So.
Right, no, absolutely,
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Well, now that we've appointed member Rosdick to chair that subcommittee. Oh, she made it, darn.
That's what I get for being late.
All right, you almost missed it. Anything else, Aaron?
On those, no, but I do have one other matter to discuss with you and just, get your opinion on. One of the other properties, 405, 407 East 7th Street, that we filed condemnation action against. It was another one that during the hearing of value on October 4th, the owner showed up at that point to contest the taking of it. At that point, we found out that they had filed preliminary objections. The Redevelopment Authority or Attorney Sundberg were not served with those objections. So we're not aware of it. I did meet with it, and Gene provided the memorandum for you as well. I met with him out at the property. The property has power. At the time we started this process, there was no power. There was no utilities on the property. He stated in court that he's living in the property. That it's in effect to keep his kids and keep visitation of his children, so they, presumably reside in that property at some point as well. So I met with him out at the property, and of course, the power's on. There's been no inspections. There's no fair viable heat source. There's no gas turned onto the property, but he presumably lives there. He provided evidence of a internet bill and then a paid receipt for water from July. Mike, are you aware if the water's on at 405 East 7th Street?
Not living there.
He paid the delinquent water bill from July. That was the latest bill. But the concern is that at this point, and Gene can speak to it, you know, if I kind of miss it a little bit. The property is owned by the Redevelopment Authority at this point. Since condemnation was filed, the Redevelopment Authority is in control of the property. So to relinquish it back to him would be through a relinquishment agreement. If he is living in the property, that opens the authority up to the liability that if something were to happen, you know, and I had discussed this with him last week, you know, there's no verifiable heat source, no gas on, you know, we presume you're using electric space heaters, the chance of a fire is high, and then how would the authority and the liability be if he was in the property under a relinquishment agreement and something tragic happened? So, you know, it's my position that we continue, you know, along the lines of the condemnation and ultimately force him out of his home, you know, because of the liability at this point, and the relinquishment of that property would open the authority up to substantial liability. Did I hit that right, Gene?
Hearing is the first time that we were able to determine that he's there with little ones, and our hearts sank. Last thing we need is a fire, and once you file a condemnation action, we're the title owners. So he's really a squatter with little ones living there with no heat source. And Aaron and I are looking at each other, and I could feel the sweat running down my face, going, "Oh my gosh, if something happens." So the judge kind of put this on a stay for 30 days to see what could be done, and we've got to move forward with this. And actually, I even thought, in speaking with Aaron last week, that we needed to contemporaneously file an ejectment action with the court and say, "Judge, they've got to get out." Even if we're going to move forward in any capacity, we can't have them in. This property's condemned. It's condemned. No one can be in there. And then to find out at the hearing that he's in there with little kids, you know, I just need to emphasize, to be able to emphasize to the court tomorrow that the board has again reaffirmed, move forward to condemnation action. And quite frankly, here's an order, proposed order with the ejectment for the removal. I don't want to wake up tomorrow morning and to hear about it under fire and find out that this is that property and it's owned by, you know, the city here. This would not be good. So that's why, Aaron, I appreciate you bringing that up, because tomorrow morning I'm going to be hopefully walking over a letter confirming that we're going to move forward with the condemnation action and that they need to be out of the house.
Did this person not know about the condemnation action? I think I missed that in the beginning. You know, I'm not hearing completely 100%. So
He was aware of the condemnation. However, he of course said that he was not aware of the blight notice that had been placed on the property for several years, and then he failed to file the proper paperwork to contest the condemnation action.
That's a great question. He showed up in court. He knew enough and had the requisite notice to show up in court and to argue, "Hey, I want to keep the place." So, yeah, he knew all about what was going on.
Gosh, I hope there aren't children living there with no heat.
So I just wanted
Very
to
responsible parent.
make you aware of what was going on, you know, as this moves forward. Of course, you know, there's always a potential for them to reach out to you or the news media and then spin it a different way. So just so you're aware of what's going on and what, you know, moving forward. So.
Tell me the address again.
405 407 East 7th Street.
I assume there's services.
East 17th?
I'm sorry.
East 7th.
East 7th.
Yes, ma'am.
There are services that we can direct him to for housing, other appropriate housing.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can identify some for him.
I think that's important. I mean, we don't often deal with occupied properties, obviously, but where we have a situation like this, and Gene's absolutely correct, the danger probably outweighs the fact that it puts a roof over these folks' heads, however poorly, but we still want to be compassionate, and if we can direct them to someone who can assist them in a relocation rather than having the constable or the sheriff show up at the end of an ejectment action and put their stuff in the street, I think that would be preferable.
Is that any of the neighborhood development organizations' neighborhoods? Is that best or?
I mean, no.
No.
No,
It's
nobody in
outside of
that
everyone.
neighborhood. You know, because they usually have relationships with those folks, and they could.
Yeah.
It would have been Serve Erie, but they've since transitioned.
I didn't hear you.
It was Serve Erie that was working in that neighborhood.
Okay.
But they've
Yeah, and
transitioned
they
back
backed
to, I
up.
think, just doing their volunteer work. But the coordinated care management, right, it would be the appropriate
Yeah, I was
place
seeing
to
them.
try to find.
Yeah.
I know family housing, especially if there's a father and children, is a little bit more challenging to find appropriate.
Yeah, and we're not entirely aware of his custody
Sure.
situation, so, but we'll certainly point him in the right direction, hopefully, so.
Wouldn't that would be considered homeless, right? So a homeless case management might be able to help. Because they're essentially squatting now.
Yeah, because we have ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Attorney Sumper, question. If you file tomorrow, will the judge give a time period for him to be released or to move from the property?
I would hope that he has, but there are a couple that we're still waiting on. So he turns them around usually within 7 days. We'll have the opinion, and I'll make note to the court that we're helping to facilitate and make sure that this family has adequate housing. I'll make sure that I let the court know that as well tomorrow. But I would suspect that it would be within 5 to 7 business days we would get an order from Judge Bishop. He's very thorough, very efficient.
All right.
Goodness.
Well, and again, I don't think this requires any formal action to not do anything different than what's going on, but I think you've got the sentiment of the board in terms of...
Thank you.
Anything else?
That is all I have.
Any other business to come before the board this evening? Motion to adjourn.
So
Kathy,
moved.
thank you for showing up to do that. Otherwise, we would have been here waiting for you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all.
Oh, I feel horrible that someone has to live like that.